Bum 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 ba-dum bum 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 da 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 dum bum bum ba-dum ba ba dum bum 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 ba-dum bum 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 da 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 dum bum bum ba-dum ba ba dum. Hello, my friends. Hello, mighties. Hello, people on Facebook. Blessings from Yorktown, says Nancy. Hello, hello. Hello from Ohio, says Vernice. Hi, everyone. Super Cool's joined. Nice to see everyone. Hi, Marissa and Cindy and Laura from Sioux Falls, southeast corner of Sioux Falls. Ariana and Susanville. It's so good to see everyone. I love it. I love to see you, my friends. For those of you who are new here, my name is Joette Calabrese, and I do this every Monday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, and I do one thing and one thing only, and that is I teach you homeopathy. And then I also see lots of shares, which is very exciting for me to witness. And we go through a particular condition or a specific medicine, homeopathic medicine, or a specific method, and I teach you how I use homeopathy and how I teach it in my gateway study groups, how I teach it in my specific courses and also my academy. So I get little bits and pieces from all of those places and then deliver them to you on Monday nights. I've been doing this for, I think we figured it was 12 years, 13 years. I still haven't even counted it, to be honest, but long time, every Sunday night. And so for those of you who do know me, hi, friends. It's great to see you all. Love to see blessings from, yep. Hi, Bob and Deb from Kentucky. Hey, Joette and friends, they're saying. Hi, everyone. Yeah, what happens here for you, those of you who are new, is that people know each other. They've gotten to know each other here, and they help each other, and they discuss things, and they tell, sometimes they'll tell each other that they have a study group starting, one of our gateway study groups, etc. So I do want you to think about joining a study group if you haven't, a gateway to homeopathy, and you can go to Joette's Learning Center. Joettes, no apostrophe, joetteslearningcenter.com, and scroll down and go to the study guide and Gateway to Homeopathy study guide, or one of the courses. But the study groups are really great, really great. So a lot of times people ask me, Joette, what's next? What should I be doing? And I really am turned on by this. I've helped my family so far. If I can help with this, maybe I can help with that and this as well, and that's absolutely so. This is not magic. This doesn't cure everyone. It doesn't always take it to a complete cure, but we can help a lot of people with a lot of suffering using these methods, this method of using homeopathy, which is practical homeopathy, and that means I'm teaching protocols. Now, tonight, I'm not going to be teaching a protocol. We are tonight going to be talking about chronic fatigue syndrome. And the first thing that I want to talk about is there's a difference between someone having chronic fatigue and someone who has chronic fatigue syndrome. So chronic fatigue can be, just fatigue from overstudy. It can be fatigue from overwork. It can be fatigue from loss of fluids after surgery or after giving birth to a baby, etc., etc. There are many reasons for it, but true chronic fatigue, which is the condition that is becoming larger and larger, more largely recognized is myalgic in nature, which means that it has some pain associated with it. But I have to also say, I can't tell you the number of times that I have had people come to me and tell me what's going on. And to me, it seems like either garden variety chronic fatigue syndrome, or just fatigue in general that perhaps is associated with something else. But they come to me and they tell me that they've been diagnosed with narcolepsy. And I have to say, I have to shake my head. What? It's a completely different condition. Narcolepsy is where someone sleeps too quickly. They fall asleep very quickly. Sometimes it's strange. They fall asleep at the wheel. They fall asleep just sitting up and they're working. I mean, who hasn't had that experience? But you know what I'm talking about. Maybe they're gardening and they fall asleep. I don't know if it's that extreme. But the information that I looked up some information on narcolepsy because I want to know, why are doctors suggesting that fatigue is narcolepsy? Because I've heard it more than once. So I went to the Mayo Clinic. You know the Mayo Clinic. They've got the hot new clinic there where they do gender surgery. But I thought I'd at least look at what they say about narcolepsy. And they say that there is no real diagnosis, to be honest. And that's true of a lot of conditions. So, but what they go by is they use your sleep history. That you might have a polysomnography, which would tell them what the wavelengths are, what's going on in your brain, and how you're sleeping, and if you fall asleep, you go into REM too quickly, et cetera, et cetera. So it was very, it was kind of not very. I'm going to say it was kind of vague. So, and of course, what is the way that's treated? Just guess. Take a guess, my friends. How is narcolepsy treated? You got it. Drugs, stimulants. Yeah, they give stimulants. Well, if you're going to fall asleep, we'll just give you something that will stimulate you, and you'll just a synthetic, a patented drug that stimulates. They also are happy to give you SNRIs. And they're also happy to give you, what was the other thing? I'm looking here. I've got my notes written here. An antidepressant. Yes, they'll give you an antidepressant. Well, isn't that great? Because then that just cures, right? Oh my gosh, I swear. And I have to say, when I see this kind of medical treatment, it makes me consider that when the person finally snaps out of the idea that this is not a really sober treatment, and that it's kind of grasping at straws and then throwing the book at the person. I mean, it's like killing a mosquito with a bazooka. I realize that falling asleep is inappropriately can be quite life-altering, but talk about life-altering. Just try some of those drugs. I mean, I just have to shake my head. So now let's talk about what chronic fatigue is, because it's much more common. I'm not going to tell you that I don't think that somebody would never have a problem of narcolepsy, but really chronic fatigue is much more common. And so chronic fatigue in the garden variety, meaning the person has pain. They have aches and pains. They have not just fatigue. They have sleep issues, and sometimes they can have sleeplessness as well as sleepiness. So the muscles and joints, a person can also have headaches associated with it. There can be poor memory or difficulty thinking, being able to go from A to B and B to C. Sometimes there's depression or anxiety, and sometimes there's even a sore throat. Sometimes it commences with a sore throat, and then from that time forward. There can even be sensations in the head, such as dizziness, and even enlarged lymph nodes, which tells us something else is going on. I don't know that it means that they've got an infection, but it does mean that something else is likely going on. So now let's talk about what we can do where we start with this. So we're going to use symptoms. I've got a handful of remedies that I want you to learn or to know about. You don't have to memorize them. But for those who've been studying homeopathy, there is this will fall together for you. It will be very logical to you. So let's start with the first remedy, and that is gelsemium. That's with a G, Gelsemium. Now, gelsemium is a medicine for sleepiness during the day, and there can also be anxiety, particularly anticipatory anxiety. So, but also when I used to teach gelsemium years ago, I have kind of dropped that for a while because I wanted to be able to expand that a little bit further. But gelsemium has a lot of D words associated with it. The letter D: dullness, diplopia, a sense of doom, drowsiness. So there are a lot of D's associated with it. But I think that what gelsemium is so useful for is fatigue, and especially if the person happens to have anxiety, anticipatory anxiety. Now, that's a different kind of anxiety than someone who has to drive over a bridge. It's anticipatory anxiety is, oh my gosh, tomorrow I'm going to the dentist, or oh no, this afternoon I have to do that. I have to present that presentation, or I'm a musician and I have to get on stage, and so there can be terrible anxiety as well as fatigue, and they don't have to be concomitant. In other words, they don't have to be exactly the same moment, but they can be within the same person. Okay. So that's gelsemium. And I love gelsemium in a 30. We can use it in a 200, but I love it in a 30th potency. Then the next one I want to talk about is Caliphos. Now, Caliphos is a cell salt, and that does not matter, but for those who are interested, who have studied a little bit more under my tutelage, you know that Caliphos is a cell salt, and it's very specific for the central nervous system. So it's fatigue, especially related to over-mentalization. Someone who is in school and studying, or there are stressful times and they're accountants, or they are attorneys, and their work is very focused, and they have to learn and they have to utilize their brain all day long. There's very little break. And that can also cause not just fatigue, but associated with it, poor memory. The last thing that kind of person wants. Or restless sleep, inability to fall asleep. And then they can be sleepy in the day and fatigued at night. Now let me say this about that statement. It is very common that if someone is sleepy during the day, they're not sleeping at night. Now it's not always that way. Some people can sleep all day, all night. That's pretty rare. But it more often is that they're sleepy during the day and can't sleep at night. So, but the fact that I've mentioned it here does mean that it has a little more punch to that statement for this particular remedy, Caliphos. Let me just see what else we've got. They are especially fatigued during the stressful times. So once the stressful times are lifted, times change, the sun is shining, the exams are over, the case is completed. Now the person no longer has the fatigue, but if it comes back again once those circumstances arise once again, then we know we might want to use Caliphos. Now I have to tell you, Caliphos can be used for any kind of fatigue. It doesn't have to be chronic. Any kind of fatigue that fits this. So I used to give my children Caliphos, the whole word is Kalium phosphoricum, or Caliphos, in a 6X to my children while they were in school studying. And it just kept them more alert. It's not that they had chronic fatigue, it's not that they couldn't study, but it helped them get through their exams. So it's not a bad medicine to use, even in spite of how short-lived the condition is. Okay, now I want to go to another remedy that I think is really useful for this. And most people don't think of this medicine for chronic fatigue, but what I love about it is that it so aptly describes the muscle pain and the joint pain. And that is Rhus tox. R-H-U-S, second word, tox. I'm giving you the abbreviated names. It's Rhus toxicodendron, but Rhus tox is what it's known as. And I really like this medicine when there is aching joints as well as muscles, or just that tenderness that some people feel. Rhus tox, I love it in a 30 or a 200. And I would use this twice daily. And I'll go back to the other ones that I didn't tell you the frequencies for. But Rhus tox and a 200 can do such good work. Now, the person often finds that if they overuse their body, they normally are not overusing their body, and now it's spring, and they're out gardening, and they're raking, and they've done a lot of work, and oh my gosh, now their joints and their muscles and every little area touch, ow, 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 ow. That's often Rhus tox. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this is a medicine for chronic fatigue. I would not call what I just described to you overworking in the garden as chronic fatigue. That's an acute fatigue. But if the person finds that they do just the tiniest bit like that, it makes it much worse, that it's already established. We already have a baseline of chronic fatigue. And now on top of that, if they do any raking, oh my gosh, everything is aching and very painful, and they can't possibly stay awake. And all they want to do is lay down and go to sleep, or at least lay down. And often they want to be laid down in a warm bath, because the heat is very comforting. Now, the heat comforts the joints and the muscles and the tendons, but it also does not revive them, however. It does not revive them from the fatigue. So what would revive them from the fatigue? Rhus tox 200 twice daily. So I wanted to be sure to include that one. Let's look at some questions. I've got a few more to go through. Let's see. For a fearful child, it depends. NCC, what does that mean for a fearful child? What is the child fearful of? That's important. But I'm not going to talk about just that, because what we want to talk about is chronic fatigue. If the child is fearful and the child has chronic fatigue, now we're on the right topic for tonight, if you don't mind. How often gelsemium for child starting school? How far ahead of the starting date? The moment the child starts to suffer. School starts Monday. They're fine. Tuesday, the week before, Wednesday, no discussion, nothing's going on. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning comes along, and the child is not happy. The child is uncomfortable and very worrisome about Monday. What am I going to do? How will I know how to act? What should I wear? I don't know what to do. I'm really nervous. Or maybe they're not even saying those words because they're too young to be able to express properly. But that is the sense that the mom and dad are getting. Now, it starts Sunday. That's the day we start. So now that's not necessarily chronic fatigue, but if there is fatigue associated with it, you're going to see some nice changes. And what you'll see is that oh my gosh, Monday I've got to be at school. I don't want to do this. This is terrible. And meanwhile, the child just doesn't have the energy. So they're wondering how they're even going to be able to push through. It's going to be like pushing through molasses, not only from the anxiety, but the fatigue. Now we're talking gelsemium. Yeah, Tom says, the medical system has totally failed me. I've been diagnosed with one condition after another for 40 years. The insurance company reported a list of remedy of nearly 36 diagnoses. No kidding. Drugs only made things worse. You would never believe what finally helped. Thank you, Joette, for teaching me how to treat myself. Let me show you a book, my friends, that you might want to consider purchasing. This is not my book. But it's called Overdiagnosed, Making People Sick in the... I circled the word pursuit. That's my little pen there, marking around there. Making People Sick in the Pursuit of Health by Dr. Gilbert Welch. This is a new person in my life. I couldn't agree with this doctor more. And it's, so I've just started reading this book, just in the last few days. I have felt this way for myself for a very long time, at least 40 years. And it has been homeopathy that turned it around, because you realize that a lot of these diagnostics are they themselves cause trouble. Okay. Fearful child. What's the name of the fatigue supplement? Okay. Rooster. Well, I don't know what you mean by that, but okay. My autistic nephew, 12 years old, was bullied in the group, threatened to break in his home, beat and assault his mom and sister. He hasn't slept well since it happened Friday, and every morning mom wakes up with the 12-year-old in her room sleeping on the floor. Wow, that's really tough. My friends, I know you know what remedy this is. There are two remedies that come to mind for me. And since we're not talking necessarily about that, we're talking about chronic fatigue, I'm going to let someone else in the group answer this. I'm hoping that someone will hop in and help out Tina's nephew. Yes. All righty. Let's keep going, shall we? Report this to the school, says Linda. Yeah. I got an idea. How about homeschooling? I know that it's not for everyone because of circumstances. Thank you very much, Jen. Jen says aconite. Aconitum 200. Aconitum nipalis 200. Aconite. Yes. Yep. All righty. And, yeah, replying to Tina. Staphysagria and aconitum. Tara, ding, 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 ding. I think they're both. Those are the two remedies I had in mind. Aconitum first and then staphysagria. You bet. Absolutely. I think we'll see a nice change. All righty. Let's go to the next chronic fatigue remedy, okay? Shall we? Let's talk about arsenicum album, okay? It's for fatigue that is not just I need to sleep. No, it is a weakness. It feels like someone has pulled the plug and it's been drained out of them. Any energy is drained out of them. They're so weakened. It's more than fatigue. It feels like crushing weakness. And the smallest amount of exertion leads to the utmost lack of strength. It's a good way of putting it. And the smallest amount of exertion causes weakness. So it's more than fatigue, it's actually weakness. Okay, and those who need arsenicum don't want to engage in any activities outside of the home or outside of wherever they live, because they know how exhausting it will be. And it's embarrassing to them, and it's also deprives them of a modicum of the amount of life that they have remaining, not in times of, not that they're going to die, but rather that the amount of life that they've got in time of a day, because it's just so exhausting. Now, they can also have extreme anxiety, my friends. Arsenicum album, people who need arsenicum album, and I would use it in a 30 or a 200. Twice daily for a few days and see how it goes. It's not to be used forever. You use these medicines until you see a shift, and then you back off, and that can be a couple of days. And if you see a nice shift, then back off. You feel as that you need to take it up again, you take it up again. And we're always looking for that tipping point. We don't want you to overuse these medicines. These are medicines, remember. They're not supplements. They're not vitamins. These are medicines regulated by the FDA as medicine, much different than supplements and vitamins. So, this disabling fatigue that arsenicum album has is often accompanied by tremendous anxiety. Anxiety about their health, fear of, sometimes even fear of death. Anxiety about every little thing. Anxiety about being poisoned. They're fearful that they might be poisoned. Not that somebody's going to come and poison them with a with a beaker, but rather the neighbors spraying pesticides, or that they've eaten food that feels like it's really bad for them and it could cause them to feel poisoned. Tina says arsenicum album has helped me with several conditions. Wow, for chronic fatigue as well. It's a wonderful medicine. It is a wonderful medicine. It is one of my top medicines for chronic fatigue, because it's So common. And why is arsenicum album so common? Because people have had a lot of drugs, and it's one of the medicines that we use after someone has had a lot of drugs. What's a lot of drugs? Well, how about taking birth control pills for 10 years? How about just coming out of surgery and having had general anesthesia and steroids and emetics, and we could keep going with all of the drugs that are used around surgery, antibiotics. And people, unfortunately, in our world today, folks don't realize how many drugs they've taken until they write them all down. You put together a timeline of yourself, you will be flabbergasted as to how many drugs you've actually taken in the last 5 years. Now, maybe not this group so much, because you folks are really on it now. And we don't come to homeopathy skipping along. People don't come to homeopathy unless they're really suffering and they've been harmed by the conventional medical methods. People come to homeopathy crawling. Oh my gosh, I am absolutely beat by what has been done to me. My illness has not gotten better with these methods, they've gotten worse. Now, I want to make something clear, my friends. There is a place for modern medicine. I don't believe it's in the chronic disease realm. I think that's where all the mistakes are made. I think that's where the problems are at their worst. I think that conventional medicine is a wonderful place to rely on when you're in an automobile accident and you're in the car and your arm is across the street. You bet. Emergency room. You can still use homeopathy on the way, but it's not homeopathy that's going to attach your arm. You need the hands of a skilled surgeon. There are times when a skilled surgeon really is necessary. Another time that conventional medicine can have some value, and that is diagnostics can be useful. They're overused, they're overprescribed, they're counted on way too much, but when they're truly needed, and you need to know what that lump is, a good diagnostician can be of great value. So there is a place for it. But once you have homeopathy under your belt, my friends, you're going to find that you will rely less and less and less on these kinds of the kinds of methods that are used in conventional circles. Okay, now let's talk about chronic fatigue when there is a loss of fluids. Okay? Loss of fluids is when someone is, let's say, an athlete, and they're not drinking enough water. Or it's a mom who's nursing. Or it's someone who has given a lot of blood, or who's lost a lot of blood from surgery or an accident. So when that occurs, or we have someone who has low blood levels, their ferritin is low, etc., I want you to think about China. CHINA, or cinchona bark, it's the same thing. So China 200 is usually how it's known, and it has a tremendous fatigue related to a loss of fluids, related to a blood disorder even. So first of all, I always tell moms, if they're nursing, they should be taking China daily, absolutely every day, because there is automatically a loss of fluids. And I always urge folks to drink a good amount of water. Not a gallon a day. I think that's over the top. Of course, it depends on your size, and there's always these metrics that you can determine how much to drink. But I like about 4 ounces every hour. That's something that Leanne has turned us all onto, and I tend to agree with it. I think it's a brilliant way to look at it. Okay, let's see if I've got something else here. One more. We only have a few minutes, but one more. I'm going to add to this phosphoric acidum. Phosphoricum acidum, or phosphoric acid. And there's an extreme exhaustion. And it is more often, as a result, a very closely tied result of having had too many drugs. And again, I'm going to go back to this. What's too many drugs? Not Cina, China. Not Cina. Cina is C-I-N-A. China is C-H-I-N-A. Not Cina, my dear. Just know there's a difference between these medicines. And I expect that when you hear me talk about them, that you're going to go to your Materia Medica and read up on them before you just say, oh, yeah, that's it, and just take it. No. I want you to read this. I want you to know what you are doing, okay? Phosphoric acid, after too many drugs. How many drugs is too many? Well, after surgery, that's too many drugs. It doesn't mean that it wasn't necessary. Often it is necessary if you absolutely need surgery. I mean, if you absolutely need surgery and you have not, if you tell me that, oh, I had knee surgery. Yeah, well, did you try homeopathy? No. Did you try changing your diet? No. Did you try drinking more water? No. Well, then I'm sorry, then that's not absolutely necessary. I'm sorry, I don't buy that bone-on-bone thing because I know many people with bone-on-bone who can use homeopathy and there's no problem at all with it. So just get those concepts away from your thinking and go more towards what can be done homeopathically first. And then if as a last resort, there truly is no other method but to have surgery on the knee or knees, even worse, thank God you're not a centipede, that's all I can say, because boy, would there be a lot of money in that. Then okay, then we've got something here. If we're going to be using these medicines, phosphoric acid, even after surgery. If the person is extremely exhausted, you're not going to use it automatically if they're extremely exhausted. So they are also, there's a psychological aspect to this too. The person feels ennui. It's a wonderful French word that describes it so well. A lack of life, lackluster. They feel burned out. They only want to sit on the sofa and watch movies. They don't want to do much of anything. So they have fatigue with this ennui, especially after having taken a lot of drugs. And a lot of drugs is just what would normally happen as a result of surgery. Okay, 200C is what I would use, and I would use it I would use it twice daily for a few days until we can see whether or not it's helping. This is not something we take forevermore. These are not, again, supplements or vitamins. And then we have one more remedy. I said I would only had one more. I'm going to go with it because of the question that's just come up. When there's depression, when there's grief, and there is fatigue from that, it is, my friends, generally speaking, Ignatia, I-G-N-A-T-I-A, Ignatia 200C twice a day for a few days or so, and see how that does. So consolation makes the person worse. They want to be alone. The grief is too great. They just have an aversion to being around people. At times they even have mood swings. They generally don't even want to go out of the home. There is fatigue and grief. Fatigue and depression. The specific kind of depression is Ignatia 200C. Did I give you all the... Yes, I did. Arsenicum album could be used in a 30 potency, sometimes 200. Gelsemium is used in a 30, and most of these are used twice daily. Caliphos at a 6, 2-3 times a day. Phosphoric acid, 200. China, 200. Ignatia, 200. And I think we have to call that a day. I've got a group coming up right now. So great to see you all. See you next week. Mwah! God bless you all. Stay curious, my friends. And like and share, please, so that we can get our numbers. And also for YouTube, feel free to subscribe as well. Take care. Bye now.
With our homeopathic protocols, you learn your remedies. My family needs me, so I must know our remedies. How much to take, how often to treat, and when to stop, and when to repeat. With our homeopathic protocols, you learn your remedies. Athusa, no dairy, it's elementary with arnica head, arsenicum fed, spigelia slither, orms from wither, no more. My family needs of me, so I improve my memory. Not only the REMs, but how often to treat, and when to stop, and when to repeat. With your homeopathic protocols, learn your remedies. Belisol red and arnica head, drosera bark, ignatia dark, source of frigid and cuprum to rigid, and crude itches, cali carbonicum, let it melt down your gumbo, vista weed are some great ways to treat ya. La 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 la, homeopathic protocols, learn your remedies.